It is my honor to be here. And so now I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this is going to work. Let's see here. It has to update for just a moment. I think we've got it. There we go. How's that? Is it working?
Yes, it is.
All right. Good, good, good. Okay. So, February, the month of love, love in many directions, right? Well, the topic is, as Gary mentioned, uh, curiosity as a superpower. That is our monthly theme. And curiosity, it's one of the most basic calls of life. Truly, it is a superpower for those who practice it. And as we study and practice our faith through this month of February, we'll be taking a look at curiosity today, primarily what lies beneath the surface. We'll be looking below the surface, looking within, asking questions, and releasing into the world the gifts that curiosity has revealed to us. Then we'll be learning and leaning into the wonderment and awe of living each day with a heightened awareness of how curiosity ignites our lives. Connecting with this superpower of curiosity, there is a spark. There's an excitement of what could be. This process of connection moves us from complacency and inspires our souls of what's possible and what is a greater future for ourselves, for our community, and for our beautiful world. Our global theme of living out loud is deeply connected to a world that works for everyone. So I just love that we played that song, What a Wonderful World. Just such a great connection there. As each of us discovers the power of the Christ within, we actually become empowered to practice a deeper faith, a deeper respect for the one omnipotent God, the one all-knowing. Curiosity is a way we can awaken our souls to this personal power. This is how we make a world that works for everyone. And this is our global vision. We envision a world where every person discovers their own personal power. So, is this world a scary place? While watching the news the other day, I stopped and I asked myself, is this information so important that I need to know this? And even more, should I be afraid? And as currently is on the news, I was thinking about a balloon flying across the continent with much curiosity and trepidation concurrently. Didn't know what to think. So if I take a deep dive and question, what am I really afraid of? I discover God has my back. God has my front, my sides, my innards, my everything, every molecule of my body. And because I'm responsible for my thinking and my actions, in this world, according to Susan, I'm in a safe place. I'm in a safe haven. I attract and bring into my world all that I need and all that I desire. I bring into my life the safety and security of myself, my family, our community, and my world, knowing I am safe within my faith and my deep connection to God. So let's take a deep dive of what lies below the surface. That which lies beneath has always been a mystery to us. For some of it, it has excitement of adventure and new discovery. For many of us, the unknown brings a lot of fear. And the slide here, it has curiosity as a superpower. The thoughts, ideas, and feelings are expectations, doubts, and fears. Oh, and my goodness, I can't read it. Oh, there it is. Oh, and faiths make up the thing within us, which is attracting or repelling certain experiences. So, in watching the TV, I could have been really afraid, or I can create my own little world and not be afraid, and knowing God really does have my back. So, as I was preparing for this talk, I was remembering a few years ago when I took up scuba diving. And it wasn't something I sought out. My younger sister talked me into it. You know how sisters can be, right? I was an excellent swimmer and had been part of a synchronized swim team in college, but that was a really long time ago. But even then, I figured I could do it. I had no idea how complicated and how much planning goes into this sport. Uh, so she even signed me up for lessons in Brookfield, Connecticut. I don't know if you guys know that, but you can take scuba diving lessons in Brookfield. There's a swimming pool um, and a guy teaches it there. But she did it, and it was during COVID. Thank you very much. So I show up for my first lesson. I was all excited. And I have to admit that in all my swimming days, I had learned that you cannot breathe underwater. You know, it's just one of those things in your brain. It takes over, says, no, you can't breathe underwater. The gear was so heavy when I put it on, I thought, I just cannot do this. And all this weight on my back, it's about 40 pounds between the air tank and all the apparatus and everything that you have to wear. So when we got into the shallow end of the pool, I discovered that buoyancy took over and it really wasn't heavy at all. It was okay. I didn't sink to the bottom like I thought I would. And then the instructor said to me, you know, put the apparatus in your mouth and we're going to go below the surface and breathe. Well, being my usual self of I can do it, I have courage. I nodded my head and together we began to sit on the floor of the pool. Well, no sooner was my head underwater than I began having thoughts of, you cannot breathe underwater. And it's like screaming at me. And so I internally panicked. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to drown. I grabbed the instructor's hand and I pointed to the surface like, we got to go back up right now because I'm holding my breath, right? So he grabbed my hand in return and he shook his head, no. And I'm thinking, what? What? Wait a minute. And I said to myself, this is crazy. But he wouldn't let me go back up. So finally, I deeply inhaled this huge breath from the apparatus that was connected to the air tank. And I thought, even at that moment, as I did it, I thought I'm going to drown. Had I connected the tank correctly, because you have to do all your gear yourself. No one does it for you. Was there enough air in the tank? Maybe the tank really, I hadn't checked it right. It might have been out of air. Maybe it's the poisonous gas tank, because they do have tanks that are not for regular diving. And so I thought maybe I had the wrong tank. Maybe the oxygen wasn't good, because they do have bad air in tanks sometimes. So the instructor, he kept firmly holding both my hands and nodding and saying, you're okay, you're okay. So we actually stay submerged for about 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity, felt like a lifetime at that moment. And I finally became comfortable breathing below the surface. Now I had a new vision of a world underwater. In the weeks following, I began to look forward to being submerged and looking at the strange new world of fish and fauna. It was magical in a sense and opened up parts of the planet to me that I had never experienced firsthand. I'd gone through the fear to reveal the wonderment of the unknown and revel in those gifts that it brings. Had I not been curious enough to try, albeit under very high supervision, I would never have known this magical world of floating with the ocean currents and the lakes. Fear arises from that mental attitude which limits the possibility and the willingness of spirit to give us the good we so greatly desire. Our minds are meaning-making machines, constantly making assumptions, making judgments, and looking for patterns. This is not an inherently bad trait. It has kept all of us humans safe as we have evolved for a very, very long time. However, between each other, these same tendencies may not serve us as very well. Our internal conversations can be filled with bias. They can be self-destructive, and they can result in hurting someone else. At the end of the day, our judgments can be the lens through which we understand the world, and that lens is foggy at best, opaque at worst. And I came across this quote from Rumi that I just think is so great. We've been walking in the surf, holding our robes up when we should be naked, diving under, deeper under. And that's all about learning to do that introspection for ourselves. So my diving story is one of a concrete nature where curiosity met fear head on, and out of that came an entirely new experience of the world. So here's another share, one where I did not practice curiosity. So as most of you know, prior to being retired, for the past 22 years, I've been a high school teacher. And that alone has given me lessons and stories enough to share over an entire lifetime. So one time I had a student named Ryan, whom some of you actually may have met some 15 years ago. He was 13 at the time I met him, and he was part of a new course I was teaching that was called Music Technology. It was all new to the school, it was new to me, and it was all new to the students. So when anything is new, there's a lot of learning that has to take place along the way. And one day Ryan was not in class. And I was curious about this because he was one of those students who participated at a very high level. He always had a good rapport with me. He loved the topic. He loved what we were studying, and he always had a good rapport with other students. Well, that day, no one knew where he was. About an hour after class had finished, I was walking down the hallway, and here comes Ryan. And I was immediately mad. Excuse me. Because I believed that he had cut my class. And I was ticked off because he wasn't being the Ryan that I knew him to be. And I think this is just part of, the teacher frustration coming out of me at the time. But part of my anger was that as a teacher, I thought he liked me and he liked the content being taught. And I just could not believe that he had cut my class. That just blew my mind. So I confronted him like a crazy person. Where were you? Why did you cut my class? I'm going to call your mother. That's the proverbial teacher threat, right? I'm going to call your parents. I'm going to call your mother. Well, I definitely was not showing up as my best self at that moment. Probably not the best way to act, but I did. So the young man walking down the hallway, he just looked at me. And he was he had this inquisitive blank stare. And finally he said to me, "Lady, you are absolutely crazy. I have no idea who you are. Leave me alone." His body language was one of, "Get away from me, you crazy person." So I stood there and I was dumbfounded that this young man would try to play me like a fiddle. And yes, that's a music joke because I was a music teacher. Still am actually. But he was trying to play me, and I just really, how dumb did he think I was? Now, in my defense, I will say that many true students do try to play you. They try to get stuff over on you. So, anyway, this is where the situation was. So, I was still indignant about this incident about an hour later. And I started telling this story to another student who I really trusted. And I told her I couldn't believe he treated me this way in the hallway. So the other student started smiling and she goes, "You know, miss, he's a twin." That had to be Craig. And I was like, "What? Wait a minute. What?" So I stopped immediately. I had no idea. And this other young man was a complete duplicate of his brother. To this day, it's still challenging to tell them apart. I've laughed and laughed about this so often to the point of crying because I was the one that was so intense and so insane. I thought I knew this truth, but I was completely wrong. So it's really interesting. As an adult, Ryan and I are still friends. He's in his 30s now, which is really crazy because that means I'm really old. But we're still friends, and we laugh about this every time we see or speak with each other because the joke was completely on me. It was really, really funny how crazy I acted and how wrong I was. I definitely did not practice curiosity that day. Thank God, both he and Ryan, both Craig and Ryan, they come to visit from time to time. Craig, his twin brother, has long since forgiven me. He laughs about it too. We all became very good friends. And then after graduation from high school, they gave me their dog, Titus. When they went to college, they couldn't keep him. So we now have a family bond, and it's very exciting. Ryan is actually getting married in September this year. So it's just very exciting to have all of this. But this was my experience of just thinking I knew exactly what the truth was and having this not curious reaction to it. Whoops, let me go back one. So while this obvious funny story is a great example of not practicing curiosity, not asking questions, and making many assumptions of what I thought to be true, well, let's think for a moment. When have you made assumptions? When have you believed certain situations to be true and were not curious enough to ask questions first? Is it possible to be curious in these moments of our world where religion and politics have become so polarizing that we find ourselves focusing on what's different between us instead of how much we really are all the same? The same needs, the same wants and desires for ourselves and our families. A world that works for everyone, not just some group that got labeled a certain way or not. Are we holding ourselves back with assumptions, not being curious? Asking what? Or asking why? And not accepting just because. This curiosity becomes the tip of the iceberg to understanding. Ernest Holmes says, "Fear arises from that mental attitude which limits the possibility and the willingness of spirit to give us the good we so greatly desire." And I just love this quote from Brené Brown. "Faith is a place of mystery where we find the courage to believe in what we cannot see and the strength to let go of our fear of uncertainty." And that's from her book, The Gift of Imperfection. So my question to all of you is this: is curiosity a power you have? Is it your superpower? Is it something you practice all the time? Are you curious enough to look below the surface? Are you asking questions and allowing for growth in your own attitude, and your own mind? What would happen if we replaced our judgments with curiosity? What could that world look like? And what would your workplace look like? And what would that feel like? I think we need to be willing to look below the surface. We need to revel in our new discoveries and the beauty they bring. And lastly, have the courage to lay fear aside and get excited about the unknown. And I thank you so very much for listening today. It has been my honor and my privilege.